Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. Our custom is to go around and say our names. So, my name is Cass.
I'm Kay.
Don. Susan.
Tommy.
My name is Michael.
My name is Christian.
David.
Jason.
My name is Stephen.
Tony. Jack.
My name is Ray.
I'm Larry.
My name is Mark.
I'm Ed.
My name is Jeff.
I'm Greg.
I'm Bob.
Jay.
David.
I'm Richard.
I'm Paul John.
Tom.
Kevin.
I'm Brad.
My name is Anna.
Well, welcome, Jason, Anna, and David. Is anybody else here for the first time or returning? What's your name again, please?
Tommy.
Tommy. Welcome. So we're blessed today to have our good friend of the Sangha, Daigan Gaither, back as our speaker today. He began Buddhist practice in 1995 in the Vipassana tradition. Began to study Zen in 2003 with Ryushin Paul Haller Roshi. Received lay ordination in 2006 when he was given the name Daigan or Great Bow. Received priest ordination in July 2011. His work, practice, and free time include many hours devoted to community service in a variety of ways, including being a sister of perpetual indulgence, a volunteer at the Zen Hospice Project, and speaking nationwide on a variety of issues. He's been on a number of boards and committees that serve the community and social justice, and has a new podcast at patreon.com/stump the monk. So welcome, Daigan.
Thank you. Always great to see you, sister. And I'm going to start with a poem, as I often do. And this is a poem by Jan Richardson. To all that is chaotic in you, let there come silence. Let there be a calming of the clamoring, a stilling of the voices that have laid their claim on you, that have made their home in you, that go with you even to the holy places, but will not let you rest, will not let you hear your life with wholeness or feel the grace that fashioned you. Let what distracts you cease. Let what divides you cease. Let there come an end to what diminishes and demeans, and let depart all that keeps you in its cage. Let there be an opening into the quiet that lies beneath the chaos, where you find the peace you did not think possible, and see what shimmers within the storms. So today is December 8th, and around the world, a lot of people are celebrating today as the Buddha's Enlightenment. One version of the story goes that having sat for 7 days under the Bodhi tree, as the morning star arose, Shakyamuni Gautama touched the earth and said, I, together with all beings, am awake. And became the Buddha. That's actually my favorite version of the story, and it's my favorite version for a couple of reasons. One is that afterwards he's said to have gotten up and started to walk and comes across somebody, and the person notices something about the Buddha and says, what's up with you? Why are you glowing and sort of interesting looking. And the Buddha says, well, I'm the awakened one. And the guy said, we'll see. And wanders off. And the other reason it's my favorite version of the story is because, one, it comes after a night of being sort of challenged by Mara, the deceiver. And there's no sort of direction as to whether or not it's an internal experience or experienced in the world. But there's this way in which I can understand having spent numerous nights being challenged by my own versions of Mara. And sometimes for weeks on end. And then also the declaration, I, together with all beings, am awakened. This idea that all beings are awake, that you already are enlightened. I think provides a really interesting challenge for us. Because it sort of says, well, if I'm already awakened, why the hell do I got to do this stuff, right? Like, why am I still an asshole? Why is my life still chaotic sometimes? And so that's what I think a lot of people kind of come to practice for, and come to start meditating, and come to start sitting on retreats for long periods of time and trying to sort of learn something about their own experience of the world. Because we all kind of want to make sense of this thing that is, okay, well, if I'm already enlightened, why is it that I feel this way? Either all the time, sometimes, or most of the time. Why do I still hurt people? Why don't I act like a Buddha? Right? And I think that, so in Zen, in Japan, the founder of the school that I practice in had that same question, and sort of had entered the monastery at a young age, and spent numerous years studying and trying to figure it out, and then sort of went, well, I'm not finding the answer here, I'm going to go back to China and figure it out. Like, if we're already enlightened, why do I have to practice? Why can I not just be a Buddha in the world? And I think that he found something that's really interesting to me, which is an understanding that even if we're still enlightened, we kind of allow the chaos of the world, the way that we form habits of mind, the way that we sort of take on our socialization, the way we sort of believe certain things about how the world is, or how certain people are, or whatever. Like, I think that we need to undo that in some kind of way. And I think the other thing that is really interesting is also that because of that hagiography, hagiography is sort of an academic term which just means a story about founders and old people in our religious practices that may or may not be true but are useful as teaching tools. In Buddhism, it's really easy because we sort of all kind of hold the idea that, yeah, it may or may not be true, but it's still useful to think about it in these ways, right? So the interesting thing about this hagiography is that for me it also creates this idea and this understanding that maybe enlightenment, maybe liberation isn't permanent in the human experience. That maybe, as some teachers have been known to say, enlightenment is merely an appropriate response. Maybe enlightenment is not some religious sort of holy place, but is actually here in the midst of the chaos that is my life. And that, in fact, in order to experience liberation, I actually kind of have to sink deeper into my experience of the world. I have to find a way to quiet my mind and my ideas and my stories and the sort of world enough that I can hear what is actually happening in my experience. And I call that embodiment. Partially because my access to it is through the conventional reality of this skin bag. And it's this skin bag in this moment with these thoughts and with this emotion and with this experience and this history, with all of the labels and identities and habits of mind and all of that stuff, I just come to this place and allow myself to rest there for a minute. Not in opposition to anything, not in guilt of anything, not in shame of anything, but just take my place and allow it to help me find an appropriate response. And I think that this embodiment is actually what our practice is. One way we can sort of develop those habits is to spend a lot of time sitting on the cushion, slowing ourselves down, allowing ourselves to come into relationship with our body enough that we can let all of it happen. Like we can just come and be present. And the interesting thing about meditation in the 30 some odd years that I've practiced it is that it's cumulative, meaning if I sit on a regular basis every day, it starts to kind of seep into the times I'm off the cushion. It begins to not be something outside there, or someplace like, I go to GBF and I sit, or I sit in this room in my house and do this thing. But it somehow starts to become the way that I wash the dishes, the way that I drive a car, the way that I walk down the street, the way that I interact in the world. One of my favorite teachers is a woman named Angel Kyoto Williams, who said, first and foremost, liberation is about choosing to be 100% accountable for who and how you are. And if that sounds like a really big job that you're going to be working on for the rest of your life, it is. This idea of just being not only ourselves completely, but also responsible for that. To recognizing, like, oh, wait, I get to screw it up and make amends and try again. I get to make choices and let those choices inform my next choices. The Buddha says the only thing that we own is our actions. That all of our choices, all of our actions, all of the ways that we are in the world influence and create the next moment. So in each moment, I can choose to sort of pay attention and make a choice that's appropriate, maybe that is in line with how I want to be in the world, which is also known as ethics or morality or living by vow, or, we have lots of ways to talk about it. Or not. And when I make those choices not, to then go, oh wait, I hurt this person, or I said this thing and it wasn't really skillful, or I did this thing and it wasn't really helpful. How do I clean that up? How do I take care of that? So that in the next moment I can then make a different choice. I don't have to drag that moment into this moment. So when I first started hanging out at Zen Center, there was an old monk by the name of Lou Hartman. And Lou was the quintessential monk. He pretty much didn't really like talking to people. And he also sort of just kind of, he sort of lived with this air of sort of dignity. But he also had these like mad skills. So, around the temple, there's various things you have to do. And one of them is we get called to meditation by a thing called the Han, which is a big giant piece of wood with some writing on it, and it's tapped out in a certain pattern. And the idea is that you tap it out in a way that's soft and inviting, and yet still can be heard from the basement to the roof. Not an easy task. And it's also sort of one of the first jobs that people who hang around long enough, they start to say, hey, do you want to do something, not just hang around here? And that's one of the first things they let you do. And so that was one of the jobs that I was asked to do, and I was doing it, and I could never really get it to sound nice or inviting, or, it just sounded like I was beating on a piece of wood. And I would hear other people, including this monk Lou, do it, and it would be this, like, wow, you just really wanted to come sit. Like, it was really wonderful. And so I said to him, would you teach me how to do it like you do it? He grumbled something and then motioned me to sort of come over by the Han, which is what the piece of wood is called. And then he asked me to hit it, and I did, and he made a couple of adjustments. And, we were there for about 4 or 5 minutes, and he made some sort of adjustments. And then he said, all right, now do that for 30 years. And he turned around and he walked off. So, I did that for about 10 years, 10 or so years. And it got better, but it still wasn't that sound, right? And I had lots of practice in those 10 years. But this thing about like, all right, now do that for 30 years, right? Can I just meet each moment and do that for 30 years? Over and over and over again. Learning as I go. Falling down, getting up, trying again, reading, learning, feeling ashamed, getting over feeling ashamed. All of the things that is this human experience, right? This chaos. Can I let the chaos be okay? Okay enough that I can sort of come into an experience that's underneath the chaos. That's underneath what I think about this moment, into some genuine experience of it. To all that is chaotic, let there come peace. And how I get to that peace is to stop struggling and thinking that I have to get it right. I just have to keep trying. I just have to keep going. And sometimes I hit it right, and sometimes I don't, but you just got to keep hitting it. Sometimes I sit on my cushion, and it's the easiest thing in the world. Now that I don't live at the temple, I still sort of sit every morning when I get up. And some mornings I get up and I'm like thinking about the cup of coffee that I've put on hold until I can actually sit. And then I've learned that if I do anything before I sit, I won't sit. So I started to just sit. And sometimes I sit and I just spend the whole time thinking about the cup of coffee that I really want to have. Or I think about like, oh shit, I got to do this. I got to go see this patient, and I got to, oh, they're really struggling with this thing, and then there are other mornings when I sit down And it's like a big, long exhale. My mind wants to say the ones that are the big, long exhale is good. And the ones that are me sort of going through my day or thinking about that cup of coffee or not really even being on the cushion is, or even in the room sometimes, is bad. And what I think the request is, I think the lesson is from this hagiography, from this enlightenment story, from the experience of the Buddha being enlightened, is that neither of those are good or bad. That we just do what we do. And we try to get closer and closer and closer to an appropriate response. The interesting thing about the 7 days that the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree was he never fought Mara. He didn't really even argue with Mara. He just sort of went, okay, yeah, that's what's happening. I'm not really interested in that, or thanks but no. And then at the very end, he just touched the earth. Came in contact with life itself. And woke up. And dragged us all with it. So, on this day of enlightenment, I invite you to sort of drag yourself into contact with just this moment, with the blessings and the chaos, with the stillness and the noise. You already have everything that you need. So, with that, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to invite you to play Stump the Monk with me. Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Beauty tips? Yeah.
Okay, let's start with beauty tips.
Lots of powder.
Moisturize. So, you talk about dragging the moment, the past moment into the present.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately went to guilt as sort of that's what's being dragged or that's what's being created in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I presume it could be pleasure too, and kind of like a grasping for. So, how do you? I mean, the thing is that the past does inform how do we embrace those past moments and not let them control the present?
Right. I think that's the trick, right? Like that's what we're all trying to figure out, because for most of my life, I dragged myself through those past moments. I thought that those past moments were me. But also I sort of would drag those moments in. Like if you pissed me off, I could hold a grudge forever. Mm-hmm. Right? Like the idea of dead to me is really, like I could do that. And then I started to realize, like, oh, I'm just dragging my anger and my resentment forward. And I'm not even doing it. Really what's happening is I'm being dragged by this stuff. Right? My emotional life drags me around sometimes. And especially those sort of more difficult emotions, grief and anger and depression and guilt, they can really get their hooks in me. And pleasure too, I think sometimes can drag me around because I just want to hold on to it, right? I want to recreate those moments over and over and over again. Yeah. You know, and it happens on retreat a lot. Like you'll sit and you'll have a really great period of time where you sit, and especially if you do long ones, like month-longs or 3-month-long periods of time, you'll have these days where it'll just be like magic. It just feels so good, and like everything drops away, and you sort of have this sense of oneness and all the things that everybody talks about, and oh my gosh, it's really beautiful. And then you get up off the cushion and like, oh fuck, that asshole's still there. What happened, right? But so then you like, my immediate response would be, okay, I'm just going to recreate that thing. So I sit down again and I just can't ever get there again, right? Letting those things drag us around rather than, oh yeah, that's my history. That's my identity. You know, I'm a queer, white, cisgendered male who lives in a system of oppression, and you know, oh yeah, that's my history, that's what I know, and that's how I operate. And, oh man, I just said that really horrible thing, or I just talked over that woman, and I really don't want to do that in the world, so maybe I should. And I can let myself feel ashamed and then drag that into the next moment, or I can go, oh shit, let me go and try to connect with that person again, and or acknowledge, like, oh shit, I just interrupted you, let me shut up for a second, and would you continue? No big deal. Apologize and move on. And try to not do it the next time, right? So, yeah, that's how I do it. And it works except on the days that it doesn't. And on the days that it doesn't, you just try again. We're so hard on ourselves. We expect so much of ourselves. Yeah. Give it your best shot. Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
David.
Hi, David.
I like the part of your poem about calming your thoughts. That's been on my mind lately, especially from chaos, I guess, involving a person. So my question is, from a Buddhist perspective, do I need to work on that letting go on my own, or is it possible to involve the person and come at it with like compassion and understanding?
There's not one answer to that. How I can get to close to what's the appropriate response in this situation is in each moment. One, recognize that in each moment I make choices, and each choice, if I can come into relationship to how I'm really feeling, what I think I need, what I think I need to help me be better, to be myself, to be closer to an appropriate response. And so I think we have to be really careful of like the idea of like, I can quiet my thoughts, right? I can provide opportunities for that to happen, but the thoughts are going to do what they do, right? The mind is created to think, so it's going to think. So can I just allow those thoughts to come and go and come and go, come and go, not drag myself, get dragged around by them, you know, like Suzuki Roshi used to say, allow them to be clouds in a sky. They just sort of pass by, right? And if you do that enough, somewhere in there will come the quiet voices, the settled voices, the peace that allows you to think of what's next, or what do I need here? So I would be really weary of people who try to tell you how to do it, other than to just say, come into contact with yourself enough to know how to respond in each moment, according to how you want to be in the world, right? This is we all sort of have this idea of like, this is who I want to be in the world. This is how I want to operate, right? Not very many of us think, oh, I want to be an asshole. So, there's this way that we have this intentionality about how we want to be in the world. So can I be that in a genuine kind of way? And how I get there is to find quiet places, to not be dragged around by my thoughts or ideas, but just to sort of let them come and go so that I can breathe into the response. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Great. Hi, what's your name?
I'm Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, you mentioned sadness and depression and guilt sometimes being strong and difficult to deal with. And I'm used to dealing with my depression when I have it by, acknowledging, okay, that's a negative thought. It's probably an old thought. It may not be true right now. But it seems like it's a double-edged sword. You want to sort of acknowledge and experience in some way, but not get pulled into it. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about ways to...
I think it's really easy to wallow, and especially the bigger moments, right? Like, so I have two sort of modes of operation, right? So I'm either really feeling depressed, lonely, isolated, and nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I'm going to go to the garden and eat worms, which often gets disguised as anger and aggression. And then I have also this place of like just complete commitment to the interdependence of all beings, and sort of and I used to think of them as opposites, right? But they're actually the same thing, which is my sort of normal state of being is to want to be connected in that, but to not feel that, right? So starting to recognize, like, I spend a lot of time sitting on a cushion, letting my thoughts happen and letting my emotions happen, so that I just kind of recognize those stories now. And yeah, so, and it's sort of like, oh yeah, that one, And then you start to develop skills like, okay, yeah, today I need to just kind of hunker down and spend time alone and recharge my battery. Or, no, I need to get out and go see people, and so I'm going to call some friends and see if we can't have lunch or dinner or something, right? Like, or sometimes it's just, I got to get up, go to work, and do my thing, right? Like, and it doesn't really matter what I have emotionally going on, or, like, my patients don't care, really. So, yeah, I think we have to be careful of wallowing, but we also have to not push things away. We have to not let things go unattended, and not, I like to say, let things have their voice, right? And so part of that is also giving them a lot of space, and just sort of being like, oh, okay, let me know when you're done, right? Oh, that brokenheartedness, okay, let me know when you're done. Do you need anything? Oh, let's have a good cry. Okay. And if I let it have its voice, if I just give it enough space, it'll kind of go of its own accord, and I don't have to mess with it.
Yeah, I've had people call me, have compassion for yourself, have compassion for that feeling, where it came from.
Right. But again, that can fall into sort of spiritual bypass and shortcutting it and not giving it space. You know what I mean? Like, we can easily, if we're trying to fix the feeling rather than just meet the feeling, like sometimes I'll have a feeling and I don't want to have it, so I'll do all kinds of psychotherapy or, like all the little tricks we learn is, older people who have lived in the world, and use that as a way to kind of Band-Aid over it, because I don't want to do it. You know, like, oh shit, I just don't want to feel that right now. And that's never good. So I'm really careful of like having compassion for yourself, or all those stories about how to do it. Just sort of let it have its space. Let it be there. And it'll tell you what it needs, and, you know, try not to fix it. I have a sign on my bathroom mirror that just says, "Don't fuck with it." And sometimes it is a person, sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's a thought, but just don't fuck with it. Thank you. I think we have time for one more. Hi.
Hi, Jay. Your stories about the importance of practice building up on itself reminded me of a story I heard, which, like your story about Buddha, may or may not be true, but gives a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that a woman sees Picasso in a restaurant, and she walks up to him with a paper napkin and asks him to draw something for her. He puts a few strokes of pen on the paper, and when she reaches for it, he holds back as a gift to her. He says to her, "Madam, that'll be $10,000. And she says, "But that took you only 10 seconds to draw." And he says, "Oh no, madam, that took 50 years.
Right. Yeah. And yet we expect that it'll take us 10 seconds, right? Like we have this expectation of ourselves. Right. I do that a lot too. Like I've practiced for 30 years, and when I'm having a hard time, trust me, I have a lot of cruelty built in about like how I should be having this experience versus how I'm having this experience. You know? And so, yes, it's great to recognize, like, yes, I practiced for 30 years, and there are certain benefits to having practiced for 30 years. But at the same time, I still suffer the way everybody else does, and I'm not really all that special. And, you know, you have to kind of hold both of those at the same time. Because it's really easy to think that because I teach, or because I'm ordained, or because I've practiced, or like to have these sort of expectations of what that has to look like, who I have to be versus who I really am, right? Or how I want to be in the world. So yeah, it's a double-edged thing, but yeah, and it's the same kind of thing, you know. In Zen, we often talk about letting it seep into our bones, or passing on the marrow, right? We pass on, when we're passing on the teachings from teacher to student, you know, it's often referred to as, "you have received my marrow." Mm-hmm. The idea being that somehow the teachings and all of the Dharma has seeped into our bones, into our marrow, and then that's what we pass on. But again, it works except on the days that it doesn't. Thank you all very much.
Malcolm, would you like to say a few things about Stump the Monk? And is there a Stump the Nun?
Well, I mean, you know, so much of my practice is actually informed by my life as a sister, and I sort of picked up meditation at the same time I picked up the ministry of the sisters, so they're kind of really deeply intertwined. So, you know, I have a Mr. Sister shirt on. You know, so it very much is that. So Stump the Monk is a podcast that a friend and I have put together that is, it's a video podcast, and it starts with questions from people. You're welcome to send in questions. And then it's me in conversation with interesting people. The first, and normally what happens is it's released early for subscribers, and then becomes public after a week. So the first episode is currently public. The second episode will be public tomorrow, and it's at patreon.com/stumpthemonk. And then also, if you subscribe for more money, you get a long version. There's always a long version. Because a 2.5-hour conversation gets condensed down into like 45 minutes, which is still really amazing. And it's not all Buddhist. It's really just about spiritual practice in our daily life. Like, how do I live in the world better? So the first one is on grief, and the one that's going to be released tomorrow is on gender, and the one after that is on chaplaincy, and then we're going to have one on compassion. And so there's a lot of stuff coming up about it. And we've committed to doing a year, whether we get a ton of support or not. And then we'll see after a year if it continues. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's really fun. And it's a conversation. It's not like me just sitting up talking. I think enough people hear me talk that it doesn't need to just be me. So, yeah, patreon.com/stumpthemonk.
Good. Well, stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. We have some fruit and cookies. They're vegan, they're gluten-free, so enjoy. And there's hot water for tea. If you have some tea, please put your cup in the sink and I'll take care of it. There's a sign-up sheet if you want to get included in our directory over on the credenza over here. And at 12:30, some people gather at the front door to go to lunch, and that's open to anybody who wants to join in. We support our Sangha through Dharma, generosity, a suggested donation, $10 to $20. It goes to paying for the space and the Larkin Street dinners that we provide once a month to homeless youth in Tenderloin. It pays for the newsletter, and it pays for our donor to our speakers so that we can practice generosity. So I'll be going around with the donor bowl and invite you to meet me there. And I got a piece of mail this week from the GBF. So I guess, does anybody want to speak to the funding drive that's going on right now?
Why did I go to the letter you may have not gotten it yet, you probably will very shortly. We have been doing, or just initiated, a fundraising campaign with this letter. As you probably heard in early discussions, there were some concerns about funding for the group, our ability to meet current and future expenses for all the things we do, and we want to do more in the future. So we're hoping you read it. I didn't write it, but it's a beautiful letter. We hope you can give as generously as you can. To save a little bit of money, you will need to provide your own postage for the return. So thank you for whatever you do, whatever you can do.
Great. Next week, our speaker is going to be Heather Sundberg, another dear friend of the Sangha, who began meditation in '99. Well, you can read about it in the newsletter. Heather, or come and see her next week. So let's gather for...
One more.
Yes.
One more. I have another announcement.
I'm sorry, yeah.
You first.
So on New Year's Eve, if you want to have an early night, I'm giving a Dharma talk at the East Bay Meditation Center from 7 to 9, which is if you want a Dharma talk just before you go out to party, or you want to be like me and be home in bed by 10. It's at EBMC on New Year's Eve, so December 31st. And it goes from 7 to 9, and they're talking about doing something afterwards, which is not going to include me because I Like I said, I want to be in bed by 10. But it's something to do on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Any other announcements, please?
Just as a reminder, which I've been trying to do each week, we do have a connection with the community thrift shop. When you have things, especially at this time of year, you may get things you don't want. And it may not be easy to re-gift them, but you could bring them to the community thrift shop, and they will do their best to market them and sell them. And we get a percentage of those sales as long as when you give them, you mentioned Gay Buddhist Fellowship, organization number 40, it will come to us. And we really appreciate that. It's a painless way of anybody giving to us, and we appreciate it.
The book group is meeting today, but we're meeting a little early just because there's another group that's using this space. So we're gathering at 12:45 today for those who are sticking around.
So again, welcome to the people who have joined us today. So please stay and no.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.